Welcome to Fire Technology Innovations Life and Fire Safety Podcast Series. At FTI, our mission is empowering people for life and fire safety.
Yeah, ironically, I had a on-site presentation in one of the large Las Vegas hotels, and I mentioned to the director of safety that I saw Ocean's 11 a week before that. And as we're talking about safety, security, I mentioned that, really the fire extinguisher service guys have to go in where you count the money. I said, that whole with a George Clooney or whatever would have been a lot simpler for them and he kind of, all he did was chuckle, and he was, you could kind of see him thinking about that. But, yeah, they have the same guys coming in, but still where that guy has been, who does he know? All this information can get passed along. So, but I want to digress a little bit too. You now had all this information, you got the patent, everything. How was it actually manufactured? Who was the person you went to actually develop and design this?
Oh, I wish it was that easy. You can't get to anywhere until you get to UL. You got to get UL started, then you get to manufacture, because you can't do UL unless you get a actual production model. So
explain to him what UL is, Underwriters Laboratory.
That's it. They're the testing labs for fire extinguishers. And they're a non-profit organization. At least they were that until we got there. What happened is we got our production models. We sent, what was it, 200 of them?
Yes, 200 of them.
We sent it to UL, and we got a thank you letter, and they were all returned to us. And it was called non-compliant. That means non-compliant with the regulations. And they had never seen anything like it before.
Because of the material, again, it was made out of, all traditional extinguishers are steel.
Right.
So they looked at it, opened it up, and like, what is this foreign-looking device? And the entire thing was rejected. And we had sent it there to them. And the way UL works is you have to submit your product, and they review it, and you pay for that, for them to tell you how much you're going to pay to test it. So it's
nice racket.
Yeah,
and then let me tell you, nonprofit too, and they don't break any of the building down. It's just like 147,000. We're going to do fire testing. Hello, pay it first, guys. Okay, so I started right away having trouble with the nonprofit. And the other side of it too is that you ever work with a bunch of engineers? I mean, talk about dry people and no conversation at all. That's the way it was there when we first got going. But to back it up, getting the manufacturer, Randy had you explained to him about Doug.
Yeah, so we started off, and we had some relationships of people that were already supplying product to some of the retailers, and they said, "Oh, we could probably get this produced because it's a tooling and an injection process. Let's go interview." And we'd flown into Chicago, Illinois, and met with a couple of manufacturers. And what they do is the bigger the press of the injection, and how the material flows is the stronger the material will be. That's the way it works. And I'm not anywhere near an expert or anything when it comes to plastics injection molding. So we spent about 3 months interviewing different manufacturers, and they were very intrigued with the possibility of doing that. And
American manufacturers.
Yeah, the majority of the American manufacturers at the time, they wanted the upfront cost for the tooling, which
$1 million,
so, minimum of $1 million. You could refurbish a tool, but it would only be good probably to get us through what we needed to do just at UL for the testing. And what are you talking about? The Underwriters Laboratory. That's in the NFPA requirement. You cannot sell or distribute a fire extinguisher in the United States, and especially here in California, unless it's Underwriters Laboratory UL. And I'm sure you're all familiar with it. You see it on a blow dryer or electrical outlet. It's the U with an L with a circle around it.
Yeah.
And then also FM, which is factory mutual.
I call it you lose.
Those are the two the two different manufacturing laboratories that they did put their mark on.
Right.
So all the manufacturers that we interviewed at the time all wanted this upfront. I mean, and we considered ourselves professional beggars at the time as it was. And when you thought
Really were.
you had to submit a production unit to UL. Now remember, on the traditional store pressure fire extinguisher, it's metal.
Right.
So I mean, you get a sophisticated welder who can do some good
Oh, yeah.
welding. You could, for a few $1,000s, you could have some pretty good samples going in there.
Explained on in Taiwan.
Not when it comes to when the traditional fire extinguisher. Now we're out of the box. With the innovation, we're driving innovation with this new material. Nylon, glass filled, things like that. So then we were referred by our original design engineer that there are really good injection molders that were in Taiwan. So he'd reached out to a few, and we made some contacts, and then I went off. I'd never traveled overseas, which was a completely new experience, and going into mainland China and into Taiwan and the food, and it was an awesome experience. The journey has been so rewarding in the experience. And believe it or not, when I land in Asia, and mind you, at this time I've been in the business for about 18 years, and we're required to have one fire extinguisher, in commercial buildings every 75 feet. I get off when I'm at the airport, there's two. We go on a tour to the manufacturer, there's two in every location where we have one. And in Asia, where we call here in the United States, somebody who runs the organization, the CEO, they call him a chairman there. So we meet with the chairman who's interested in this, and he only speaks Mandarin, and I'm giving the presentation through an interpreter about the product and what we see and what we want to do in the market. And he immediately realized it's very disruptive. The product's very disruptive. And I'm thinking from an entrepreneur point of view, my God, this product is even more needed here in Asia
Right.
than it is at home in the United States.
What
And
was the reason for the two?
I asked the chairman, I said, why do you have two fire extinguishers in every location? Oh, and by the way, at his manufacturer, you have, little, small Asian women
Yeah.
working in the assembly.
20-pounder
And
extinguisher.
they have a 20-pound extinguisher that probably almost weighs half the weight of the gal that's working there. I mean, it was ridiculous. She wouldn't even be able to handle the fire extinguisher, put the fire out.
Mm-hmm.
But again, even in Asia, they were meeting the requirement. Well, at least they had the fire extinguisher there, but they were falling short on how is the end user even going to be able to operate the fire extinguisher.
Tell them how the chairman started yelling at the people.
So as I'm talking to him, and I asked him, what's with the two extinguishers in our location? He said, well, the Chinese government, there's a lot of humidity in Asia. They found that a lot of the fire extinguishers weren't operating properly. And then immediately you're thinking the moisture and there's compaction. So we'll put two.
Okay.
Maybe one will work.
Yeah.
And that's still the way it is today. And this was, nearly 16, 17 years ago when I was there. And so in his language, he was getting all worked up and he was yelling. It was his sons that were there with him, and he was yelling at him and everything. And when I finally got through, I said, did I upset him? And we got in the elevator and they said, no. He was very excited. And he said very seldom, maybe once in a decade, does a concept and an idea and a product like that come across his desk.
Wow.
So that we kind of aligned with them, and we started with the process. So they were willing to come in with us and develop the tooling.
Well, they had a relationship with UL. See, they felt they did. Because they'd been working with them for like 80 years, so the chairman, he knew all the UL people there. Oh, no problem. I get it through, no big deal.
And the relationship was for lawn furniture and outdoor living and things like that. All the modern things you'll see in our major retailers like a Costco, that slick seasonal things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was really what their core business was. And he did have a relationship with UL, and because there's either electrical or motors or water in those outdoor barbecues and things like that, he had a relationship there. And we didn't know it at the time, but the only place you can test and get listed and or certified with a UL listing is in Northbrook, Illinois, in the entire world. Even though in Asia, they have UL locations and facilities
Right.
because it's a safety device.
Mm.
UL was built on both electrical and fire, so they hold that very close. So the only way you can be certified or listed is in Northbrook, Illinois, even if you're a manufacturer in Asia or India
Huh.
or anywhere. And I believe they're making some changes to get in other locations. But up until now, if you wanted a portable fire extinguisher, even if you're not going to be in the market in the U.S., you still have to test the United States here in Northbrook, Illinois. So we found that out. And they didn't understand the standards or anything. They were looking at it more as, an outdoor living,
Sure.
furniture.
Sure.
So it'll be that same process, like 6 weeks or so to get this thing through.
And he thought he could get it done for $30,000.
And fire extinguishers are about the most challenging, difficult to get through UL because of the requirements.
Yeah, the requirements of the UL test is that it's an ANSI 299 and 711, and they're listed on every fire extinguisher on the label. And when you really get into it, there's a lot of detail. And the testing, if you were to start today, to have if everything was perfectly streamlined, would take they say about a year, but it's more like about 18 months. And because we were so new, they had no standard to speak to anything on our fire extinguisher that we were bringing it to them. The journey at UL was a little over 9 years.
Yeah, and the thing we went after was NFPA 10. You got to look for ways to get around things, and all the government regulations. NFPA 10 says that nothing shall impede creativity and innovation. Nothing in the section shall.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what we grabbed onto.
Okay.
See, and that's what we'd raise that banner every time any government agency or UL would stop us. We'd go right there.
And now when we were at UL and we're there with their brilliant engineers and the people that are working in the labs with us, we have that one-on-one where, to my knowledge, I don't think there's been a whole lot of entrepreneurs, small fire extinguisher service companies that have ever leapfrogged all the way to UL. And I had a lot of experiences there in between. I became one of the master distributors for Badger, which at the time was the second largest extinguisher manufacturer in the world. And what I mean by master distributor is the volume of new extinguishers that we were selling. So that gave me a direct relationship with the vice president, president of the extinguisher manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back a little bit, when we were talking about left-half biased and things like that, the three of us went they were in Virginia. We'd go sit down and meet with them. And again, very seldom did a small business fire extinguisher service company get to that level where we're working directly with the president, vice president. And we'd say, out there on the data we're bringing back, why is the fire extinguisher designed for left-handers? And they would kind of look at us with a blank stare. And there was literally, surprisingly, a disconnect from a major extinguisher manufacturer to the end user. Now, the way that's structured is all the major commercial extinguisher manufacturers, they sell through distribution, which are FEDs, fire equipment distributors like ourselves. So he said, the president of the company at the time, I'm a tax and I'm an attorney. I have a tax background. I'm an attorney. I leave that to my engineers. And we were kind of like, wow, how could there be a disconnect? Well, now you fast forward and we're at UL and we're listening to these engineers and they're only focused on wall thicknesses and how the flow rates and all these things. And we're like, well, why don't we let it flow for 35 seconds for the end user? Oh, no, the standard says it's got to be between this and only 18 seconds.
Regulations.
And you have to do this, you have to do this. And we're discussing this with the engineers and you could clearly see a major disconnect from this required product that has to have this certification. They have no idea what is going out in the field with this product once it gets out there. And I started to explain that to them, and there was just kind of a blank stare. Like,
Well,
this
This is the way we've always done it.
Yeah, you always have to. What you have to understand is that we're a hug people. Okay, the virus took that away from us, but we build the relationships. Excuse me. Anyway, I'm thinking about the experience. When we first sent it to UL, 200 items, they sent them back to us. and they said non-compliant, right? I was not too pleased with that, so we decided we were going to figure out a way around this thing. So I wrote them a letter, looked up the UL, got chairman of the board and all the board members, and I sent them a letter stating all the issues with the extinguishers, stating that public welfare was at stake here, and that I intend to go hell and overboard.
Mm-hmm.
That they're going to test it. They advertise everywhere that they're a testing lab, and they're going to test that extinguisher. Period. And then we got hold of Jim McMullen,
was a California 2-term state fire marshal,
Yeah.
retired.
So we brought him on board. Said, listen, do you know anybody at UL? Yeah, he knew a vice president there. So he called the vice president.
Who is here in Brea, California.
Yeah.
They have a UL location here in Brea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the word came back from the head engineer, George. I remember his name. And
George Laverick.
Yeah,
Yes.
He said, "You will, yes, I will see you. You can bring your product through here. Be here Monday at 10 o'clock.
For 15 minutes.
You have 15 minutes." We say, "Okay, we're ready to go." We load up.
Now, mind you, not to interrupt you, Dad, but
You did.
we already have multi-million dollars invested in this.
Yeah.
Everything's in. We're all in.
Yeah.
So you got 15 minutes.
And this guy's going to give us 15 minutes to fly there to Northbrook, Illinois. And from what I know, his reputation in the industry, he is the man. He's been there for 36 years.
He's it.
He is over portable fire extinguishers.
So we get there, right? We're loaded up, and when you get there, if you're a sane person and not an entrepreneur, you could be intimidated,
Sure.
It's a compound, and they
Yeah.
take you around literally on a bus, like
On
you're
the
at
bus of theirs.
like you're at an amusement park. I mean,
and we're here, and then you go in there, and you got to wear a mask, you got to wear a hard hat,
The name badge.
They load you up. So anyway, we get in the conference room.
and I'm taking the time, and I set up
Yeah, he's
everything.
setting
I'm very
everything.
proud. Everything beautiful,
Yeah.
in the units, and I want to show them how we're going to how you're going to operate it and such.
He sets it all up, and in walks the engineer with his crew, and he sat across from him. He says, took his watch off, put it on the table.
15 minutes to
You
start.
got your you're on the clock. Tick
Yeah.
tock, tick tock.
By the way,
He
he completely ignored and wouldn't even look at the
Yeah,
product.
Look at it.
Wouldn't even look at it to even acknowledge it when he walked in, and still it wasn't even acknowledging it.
Yeah,
That's what they were there. We were there for.
I'm about ready to climb over the table, but anyway, he Randy makes a great presentation, and he didn't even wait for him to stop. He just picks it up. Your 15 minutes are up. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll
Wow.
get back to you on your product.
Wow.
So we get out of there, and we get in the bus.
And the 2-term state fire marshal was with us,
Yeah.
and that was his first opportunity to come to UL. And not only was the disconnect with the manufacturer on what's going on with their product when it's out in the field, the 2-term sitting California state fire marshal said, we can just test it right here in Brea. Had no knowledge that UL
Didn't know.
that it's only in Northbrook, Illinois at
Right.
that time.
Right.
So we're in the bus, and then Jim says to me, "Hector," I said, "What?" He says, "You can't be, you got to watch yourself." I said, "What about?" He said, "They're gods." And I said, "New one coming," So we went back, and that's when, I called everybody. We raised all kind of cane.
Yeah, there was a show that was coming up in 6 months, which was the NFPA show in Las Vegas, and we said, well, we'll go out there. UL's a big sponsor.
They're
of it.
sponsoring.
What year was this?
This is
About 10 years ago.
2004, 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we go to UL, and there was the industry was a buzz on the consumer side because there was a product called the Home Hero that had just come out, and United Technologies was behind it, and there was a big push with one of the large box retailers. But it was the same old product that you can get in a jet ski or a watercraft,
Mm-hmm.
and they literally took that same product, changed the head, and put it in a new suit, and charged 4 times much for it. So for the consumer, it was another one of those check marks for us that they're just taking advantage of the naivete from the consumer, we'll just put out something in a new suit and charge, X amount for it.
Yeah.
So we're at the booth and we're waiting for the president CEO to show up at UL. That's our, we're only basically seeing red, and we want to get the attention
Yeah.
of the president that what we have. And what part of my issue, remember when I was doing the presentation when he had his watch sitting there on the counter, everything I was telling him was my experience in the data, Mike. I know how important data is to you, of what we found out in the field. And at the time, I didn't understand how UL works or how their process was. It was irrelevant because UL just tests a product brand new, and they disregard anything that goes on out in the field with it. It's only as it's tested new, and they're good products,
Right.
as brand new in the manufactured. But where all the issues is once it's out and it exposed to the environments out in the field.
And we were there to save lives. That's a whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're waiting in the booth, and a VP comes up to us and he introduces us to us. And unbeknownst to us, he brings over somebody else who was indirectly involved in the Home Hero. And he says literally in the middle of the introduction, well, he was in the UL VP says this gentleman was involved with the Home Hero. And he says, excuse me, the Home Hero is a piece of shit.
And this guy is bigger than John.
And at the time, this was the new thing in the industry.
Right,
And for him to say that, it was kind of interesting. So he said, well, gentlemen, would you speak to him? Would you take him? So we take this guy who was involved with, and I mean, there were the push and the marketing that was behind this product. It was the Arnell Group. They're the ones that negotiated the Coliseum in Las Vegas, and he was neighbors with Martha Stewart. So there was a big interest in this. And the reality is, it was, like I said, it was just the same old product that's been around for 50 years in a new suit. There was nothing.
Just another ripoff. Is all.
So this individual literally goes back to our room with us. We click. And fortunate for us at the time, we didn't realize it, but he actually was involved in the service industry of fire extinguishers, and he was out of on the East Coast. We open up the prototype of the Eliminator, and we're showing it to him. And at the time, we had a clear unit, and we turn it upside down, and we show it to him, and he literally sat down. He was like, "You could take that new product that was out, the Home Hero, and put it in that and grind it up. That is wow." So we got his interest, and he was the new kid on the block.
This is it. This is it.
And he goes, "You have a solution here," because he knew right away the issues that were going on, the pervasive systemic issues in the service industry of portable fire extinguishers. So he went back, got us a meeting with that VP, and the VP agreed to meet with us, and he brought him and his director, and we went to their room. And
he told them, these guys are the real deal.
I literally had a video I just found it on YouTube of somebody servicing an extinguisher in the back of their truck. The nephew videotaped his uncle doing it, and he was drinking his beer while he was servicing the extinguisher. And I literally just set him on the couch like this, in the hotel room at the Mandalay Bay, and played this video for the VP over the fire protection and his director underneath him. And you could literally see them kind of shrink into the couch, and it moved them that they had tears in their eyes. And then one looks at the other one and said, "We should have had a follow-up system on what's happened with the extinguishers in the field."
He said, "We got to do something about this. We got to do something."
That was their epiphany.
They got up and they said, "Gentlemen, we're going to help you." And
We'll set up another meeting.
Those three, the one that went back to the hotel room with us, and then that VP and his director, kind of held our hand all the way through the process of that next 7 years with the UL journey.
Wow.
Randy, you made a strategic choice that while you weren't going to follow the regulations, you were going to meet all the standard test requirements.
Absolutely. We had with the UL process.
Yeah.
And just talk about some of those to give people an idea of how strenuous this really is.
Yeah, for the fires alone, if I could paint you a picture of the wall, and every fire extinguishers, they go by a rating. The end user looks at it as a 2.5 pounder, a 5 pounder, a 10 pounder, and we talked about a 20 pounder in Asia. But The reality is it's a rating. It's made up for, it's 1A10 BC, 2A10 BC, 3A40 BC, and so on and so forth. And what those numbers and letter designation mean is the type of fire that it's capable of putting out. So you have a 1A panel, you have a 2A panel, and then the B is the flammable liquid. And so to strip it down, we were going after a 3A40. We wanted to get the highest rating you could get for a 5-pound unit. So when we hit the market, it's impressive for the enforcement folks, the insurance. And the wall is 12 by 12 by 12 tall, and it has to be very little moisture content. The wood is dried out, and it's a whole production. Where UL purchases this wood, they have a special mill. It's how it's assembled, the type of staples or nails that it's assembled with. I had no idea of the detail and requirements that goes into just the requirements of this wood panel. And then they have a crib that's about half the size of this couch, that's about this tall from the floor. And same thing, same type of construction. And it has these little alcove openings all the way around it. And then that has to have an X amount of time pre-burned before you start to fight the fire. And you can only hit it from 3 sides and the top. So if it was a piece of furniture up against the wall. And you have to put out 2 of each of these simultaneously. And then because the fire and the rating we're looking at, the rating is so high, at the time, the EPA wouldn't even allow you to do it at UL in Northbrook, Illinois. They had a contract with their sister company up in Canada. So to do the outdoor fire, so you do an indoor pan fire, that's a 12-inch pan filled with 8 inches of heptane, and then water on the top of that you have to knock back. So you got 4 different fires you're fighting. And we had to go up to Canada to do the outdoor fire. And no joke, from the ignition for where you start the fire in the pan to the wind. Rudy could tell you about the experience with the wind and how it has to be between like 6 and no more than 10 miles an hour. And they have a windometer measuring the wind, and the wind has to be blowing specifically right direction. But from ignition of the beginning of the flame to when the wind's blowing just right, measure it was 155 feet. And the listeners thinking, would you ever think you could approach a fire with a fire extinguisher that has flames that go 155 feet? I mean, it was unbelievable. When we're at UL and we're doing that wall panel, the firefighter that's fighting the fire literally has to get into this like space suit. Yeah. Because you can't even be in the same room or it would burn your flesh off. Yeah. Because the fires are so intense. And now we're watching this, and we're doing R&D at UL, which wasn't the greatest thing to be doing because of the cost and expense.
Up in Canada, though, when they're up there, they had it's outside burn, right? And so they had no restroom facilities. The little cabin they had there.
It's not cabin, it's a shed.
There's a shed.
And the floor was just pavers.
How you had to get him to cover it up, Randy.
Oh yeah, with that. We have our delicate chemical that we're not supposed to have any moisture. And it up in Canada, it started raining. And there were literally holes in this metal UL facility that we were paying
absorbent
amount of money.
$150,000.
It was about $150,000 a week. And we're out there, and these heptane containers are $3,800 a piece.
And they're watching the sock, the air sock. Which way is the wind blowing?
And I have my son out there, and he to come experience what this is going to take. And they dumped these 3 heptane pails. Just thought we were going to do a test, and they were $3,800 a piece. And then they light it, so that's like $12,000-$13,000. And it starts raining. I say, okay, no test. And my son looks at me and he goes, Dad,
they're burning $4,000.
Didn't they just burn like $12,000? And I said, yes. Then we look up, and all of a sudden, this UL facility, the water starts dripping into our dry chemical that we can't have any moisture to try and get this fire out. And we run down to one of the barracks because it was on a military base, and we, the customer, buy a tarp so that we can tarp this shed to keep our chemical from getting any moisture in it so that we could hopefully put these fires out. That's just one experience of getting this to the market.
Remember, we were with them for 9 years. Okay,
Nine years.
and each one. When we first got there, just like I said, you walk in, you got to have your name tag, you got to sign in. You can't even go to the restroom alone. They got to take you to the restroom. They escort you everywhere. No cameras, nothing. Okay. Now, as we're moving along, we don't go to their side. We stay on our side. So we do a fire test. We're screaming and hollering. We go and hug everybody, whether they like it or not. Okay, and so we're really breaking them down slowly but surely. So and it's beginning to work. And they begin to become human again.
So the VP and the director I told you, who was very supportive of us, I called him and I said, "Have you been out here?" And he's like, "No." And now, again, I'm reverting back to a personal relationship, entrepreneur, paying real money. This is not a major enterprise manufacturer that's sending his high-end engineers out there.
Yeah.
We're looking at it from a small business, professional beggars to raise money to get to this point. And I'm like, listen, grab the president, fly out here on your jet, and when you need to take a leak, make sure that the wind is blowing in the right way, because there's no facility in here. When you're relieving yourself, make sure it doesn't get on his $1,000 shoes. That was the reality, and I needed to get their attention of what was going on. And we, to say the least, we weren't successful. So now I'm talking to the UL engineers up there. Let me ask you a question. You have this, and you have this wind, and these pans are in the ground, and all they had to do is just pivot them, because you're literally relying on Mother Nature up there. And we had 5 engineers with us. We had the UL engineers, and you're literally sitting in a bedrock waiting for the wind to change, or waiting for the wind to calm down, or waiting for the wind to start. This was the reality of what it is to get a portable fire extinguisher listed.
Wow.
So that we could get into the market to sell it. And I asked the engineers, well, what happens when you have a fire? It's not going to be dictated by where the wind's blowing. Where did this standard come from? Why is it the way it is? And why don't we have big fans out here and manage and be able to get? And they would just look at a blank stare, like everybody just followed the way the standard has always been developed, and that it is what it is. And then after that part of the experience and talking to other manufacturer engineers, that's the whole catalyst here. I'm looking at it from an entrepreneur, business owner, salesperson.
Saving lives,
protecting property.
Time is money.
What happens is the manufacturer hires the engineer studies every detail of the standard. He flies out to the UL facility. He's only looking at it and communicating with like-minded engineer.
Yeah.
They're deep, focused just on the standard. What is it going to take to make this work, to get to where we need? He's going out there. He's not looking at the bathroom facilities. He's not looking at the rocks.
Right.
Oh, by the way, real quick, there were weeds all the way around the pan.
Yeah.
Okay. And the guy that went out there, he had rented on his own dime a tractor disc to pull behind his truck to knock down the weeds. But there were still blunts of them all the way around.
And what
was happening is when we'd light the fire and then the fire would burn over, you'd get it out of the pan. Well, the weeds would start up, and then the fumes would reignite it over and over and over.
Jesus.
And I could share some pictures if we like. Rudy was there, and my son was there, and some of the engineers. We found some sand, and we literally went and got shovels and we dug.
It was like moving Newport Beach to Laguna Beach. That's how much sand we moved.
And we ended up putting sand all the way around the pan so that we could cover up those blunts of weeds.
Yeah.
Paying them $150,000 a week to do that.
We're just trying to get a listing on a fire extinguisher, but now we're out there and we're literally like landscapers. And I have photographs where my son's almost up to his shoulders and Rudy's up to about here. That's how much sand, because the pan is as big as this room area here that we have to get out, and we were never going to get it out. But if you continue, you have to come back. It's a positive financial margin for UL.
Sure.
If you have to keep coming back every other month.
Oh yeah, they want you to fail.
So I don't want to say that.
Yeah, they're not. Yes.
So we're finally moving down, and now they're becoming human. They're letting us go to the bathroom by ourselves, And so we're moving on, and then Randy's son came up with the idea to get that head-mounted camera,
GoPro.
and they let us do that too. And then we're in the conference room with all the engineers, and George, our head engineer, sitting across the table from me, and he says to me, "Hector, how did you ever get that thing to hold the pressure?" And I said, "Well, the only thing I can tell you is that all of you guys are engineers. You're all very educated people. We're just business guys trying to save lives. We didn't stop where you did. We didn't know we should have. We just kept on going."
But what he's talking about the pressure is, again, the standard. Like we were out in Canada, we're back now at Northbrook, Illinois, and they do a pressure test, and it was 6-to-1 safety factor. And according to our design engineer, our bridges that we drive on here are a 3-to-1 safety factor for earthquakes and structurally.
These are burst tests.
And he's saying, he's even questioning, why does UL have a 6-to-1 safety factor on a fire extinguisher? They're not up to date. Our bridges we drive on every day are 3-to-1. So we go back and we ask the question. They won't answer it. We don't know, 80, 90 years ago. Well, now we're in that process of burst testing our unit. And we got to go 6 times the operating pressure, which puts us over 1,100, 1,200.
And then Emil and George, they're both the naysayers. They're standing on either side of me. "Hector, this one here is never going to happen. I mean, you guys have been lucky, and you should be optimistic. That's good, but you got to know when your shortfall is going to happen." "Oh, yeah, well," I said, "stick around."
So we end up, because we had pre-tested, obviously, getting, some of them went as high as 1,400 PSI. And the technicians now, their eyes are like this. They're calling some of the managers. They're coming down.
Everybody's calling.
And you had to do 9 of them. And all 9 or something like that. All of them were exact where they burst. And what I mean by burst on a cylinder, you can't have the bottom or the top come apart because it's a projectile. It has to be safe. Well, it's a sidewall split. And every one of them were identical. You could see through the label where it had failed. And they were all studying this, and that's when he was referring to where he said,
they joined our ranks. "Oh my God,
Yeah.
How
look
did
at
you
that.
know?
This. Come over here. Come over, look at this." And I said, "George, what are you doing? What's so excited? It burst, big deal." He said, "No, look at it. Look at it." I said, "I'm looking at it. Burst."
So it was
And
a
he said,
consistent
"No,
burst.
They're all
Yes.
the same." He
Consistent.
said, "They're all the same."
So they brought us in, and we were having a meeting about it, and then they disclosed that on the traditional steel extinguishers, they don't know where it's going to fail. And that's part of the reason why they have that 6-to-1 safety factor. But on ours, even when it would fail, it was safer because of the predictability of it. There is no predictability on a traditional steel extinguisher, stored pressure fire extinguisher.
Tell them what they were doing with the testing with the plastic company for 9 years.
Yeah, we were disclosed by
This finally came out.
and we're told that the UL, and now this individual that set his clock, he had retired out. He was gone.
Sure.
I told him, I'm gonna wear you. I'm gonna outlive you with your retirement because I'm gonna stay here. We're gonna keep going. It was a threat and a promise at the same time. We ended up becoming friends with him, and it was our naive, not knowing the whole process and the way we looked at it. At the beginning, it was like they were our enemy.
Yeah.
Stupid just keeps moving on.
Yeah. So, but the reality is that we didn't understand that part of the process with UL, and they've all become really good friends of ours, and we understand why it's needed and what it is. But it was those wins along the way that
Right.
it wasn't us doing it. It was demonstrating our perseverance and
But
keep
they
coming.
they had gotten together with all the plastic companies in the United States, and they were trying to create they wanted a butane tank.
Butane and underwater
Plastic.
underwater pipelines, and they couldn't get with expert engineering. 3 of the top major plastic resin manufacturers, they couldn't get the PSI to go over 400,
They couldn't get it done.
and we were over 1,000,
So how did you do
1,200.
it?
Wow.
So they said that there might be some interest there and some licensing, the technology there.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then that again went back to how we were injecting it. It was proprietary what we were doing, and getting the strength there. So
We put nylon in it too.
a lot of the questions now is, well, it's it looks like it's nylon, or it's in the plastic family. How can it even uphold to what a steel extinguisher is? Well, the reality of what we found out in the testing of UL, it's more durable because it went at higher pressure, and it also can't be susceptible to rust.
Right.
So
right.
now UL, we've got their attention, and then we
Oh, yeah.
started to get more and more momentum. They
Everybody,
stood-
even the receptionists and secretaries. We were leaving one day, and we didn't go back through the office. They all came running out to give us a hug.
Wow.
See you later.
So now we would go back
So
to
you,
the shows, and we would be invited to their their parties and things like that.
Randy, so this is a great example of perseverance over 9 years to get through all the UL testing so that you could say the product there right by John's foot is UL certified.
Yes.
So that was a breakthrough. So now you're UL certified and ready to go to market. Talk about your experiences with the codes, the AHJs, and getting the Eliminator to be accepted, even though it's gone through the most extensive testing of any other fire extinguisher.
Well, mind you, because of the proprietary nature, we hadn't really exposed or disclosed a lot of what we were working on. It was very confidential. The ones that we could confide in, which was former fire marshal, current sitting state fire marshals, that they're tasked with all types of responsibility, and one of them is kind of like an irritant, is following up on unscrupulous service companies. So when we talked to them about the technology, they'd see it. They were very impressed and said, the reoccurring response was, "This is the solution. This is the solution. This is the solution." So when we couldn't go to market until we had the UL in hand. Once we get the UL in hand, we went to the California State Fire Marshal. Well, obviously being here, we had the inroads in there. We presented it to them, and
Before we left UL, though, what they did is Andrew was the one who did all the testing with us, and he called Randy and said that he asked him to come in the next day, and he said he had a surprise for him. So Randy went there, and he said, "I want to congratulate you. We're doing two things that we've never done before with anybody ever." And all the engineers got together and voted on this. Okay. Randy, so what's that? He said, "We're going to give you self-service, and we're going to put it in the name of Randy, Rusoh, and family."
Wow.
because all the other listings obviously went to the engineer and the manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
it's, we that was a nice moment in the journey.
Sure.
It's big
Sure.
for UL.
They became
Yeah.
human again.
Yeah.
So we're at the California State Fire Marshal here in California, and we have the assistant fire marshal, we have the deputies in charge of portable fire extinguishers, and enforcement officer, former California State Fire Marshal. We sit down and we had the director of marketing for the manufacturer. We had Hector and myself. And
This is what year?
this is 2017,
Okay.
and
Dave was there, the engineer.
yeah, and then the engineer for off-state fire marshal in Sacramento. Very well received. Matter of fact, the deputy that's in charge of the portable fire extinguishers thought, "Wow, this is really something. I want to get one." Randy, not only does the California businesses need this, I'm going to get one for my home. And they said, what we're going to do is, because it's so different, what we need to do is we probably need to have we're going to have to work with the Fire Extinguisher Advisory Committee, and the Fire Extinguisher Advisory Committee is made up by the industry here in California. They're going to have to take a look at it. And right then when he said that, I thought, well, a majority of that group's made up by the current manufacturer,
Yeah.
who potentially could be our competitor. There's also companies on there that supply to the service companies.
Well,
So-
the guy that was in charge of the extinguisher program at the time when Randy made the presentation, and when he turned it over,
And he could see
turned
the
wheel,
chemical moving.
Yeah.
he saw that. And before he was sitting back like, "Oh well," and when he did that, he sat up and he said, "Randy, do that again." And so Randy did it again. The powder just flew down, and he said, "Finally, we're going to get rid of those goddamn."
Can you show
service
that, Randy? You have that unit. Show
clear-
that, because that's back there. This is preventive maintenance. No other fire extinguisher can do that.
Yeah, so
That's right. And
so
it
what
can
so what's
sit there for-
happening is, when you turn it over from that void I was talking about and how it's tapered, you just turn this wheel 1, 2, 3 times and back over, and you can see that the chemical is now truly in a fluid state. And
That's when he said we can get rid of the service company. That was the impact on him.
Wow.
And then he said, "What will do?" So wait a minute. What about the He said, "Don't worry about the regulations. We'll put you on the BML
BLM.
BML.
I think you can catch that,
takes
Mike.
it out of the regulations. So
Yeah.
BM, right? Building materials.
Yeah, building material
materials.
listing. So that was the next process, was to get us listed in the BML program, and that was an application. The engineer asked to review all the technical details of what we had here, and so there was some proprietary nature there that there were some concerning things. Do we provide all this information to the engineer? And then we went through that process, and we got listed. And in California, because of the regulations here, if you have an outdoor event and you have to have a tent, it has to have what they call the fire marshal's bug, which is the logo of the state fire marshal. And you could be in Chicago, Florida, New York, and they have their own requirements. But if you have the state of California's fire marshal logo, you can use it in all 50 states. You cannot use a BML listed product from New York or Illinois in California. So that was where we wanted to. The strategy was, let's get the approval from California, and then we'll move that on out. We also had some individuals working in New York also. We got listed. We were the first and only portable fire extinguisher ever listed by the state of California, which was quite rewarding, as you can imagine. And I don't know if you can see that, but it's the logo right there. It's the California State Fire Marshal seal. And we were allowed to use it in our marketing, and literally it's on the label of the product. And back here, obviously, is the UL listing. So then we're saying, okay, we're on our way. The state fire marshal at the time said, because it's so new and unique, what I would like you to do prior to doing a big marketing campaign and launching it, we really need to get the buy-in from the fire service. Could you go to the fire shows, educate the fire service to what this is, because they're the ones that are tasked, the AHJs, authority having jurisdiction, to go out and do the inspections. We said, sure, by all means, that we want to co-create this with the Office of State Fire Marshal. Please give us the direction on how to do that. And that's what started us in the market. And we launched and we decided to go to the FDIC, which is the largest international firefighter show every year in Indianapolis. And we launched there in 2017. And the response was like none other. We were in an aisle, and there was times when the public and who was attending the show couldn't even get down the aisle because we totally underestimated the response. There were so many people and firefighters that were there and were excited about seeing the product.
No brainer. That's what they kept saying. No brainer.
Yeah, one thing good about this, as far as what you've been talking about, the visuals, because a lot of the crib tests, the FDIC show, we have that on YouTube. So we can actually put links and people can actually see some of these tests that were done, some things. So the stories now more come to life as well.
Yeah,
But
you had that Canada one, that Canada fire. You should
So,
have that.
to Mike, some of the barrier of entries into the market have been what we found is it's a huge education piece that, and not just here in California, we're making some headway here. It's that it's so fragmented, and you think, the fire department, the firefighter out on the truck, well, he's not the decision maker, although he's the one running into the building and our hero to put out the fire.
He's the one that really likes the extinguisher.
He's the one that really likes it because he's the one that is actually going to be physically using it, most likely. But it's the administrator, and their hands are tied because of the regulations in the code. And the regulation and code says in a required area, which is the business in place every 75 feet, it must be inspected, 6-year tear down, tested by a licensed concern. And that's the structure. So now we are here on the market a little over 3 years, and we're having that conversation with, and it's really an education piece. We're really not selling the product per se. It's more of an education, and the people that understand it, that are your facility safety people in a business, they've been tasked to keep the portable extinguisher maintained, to keep a safe environment for their employees or the public that comes in there. They get the product immediately, and their wants are, what is my local fire marshal? Now that fire marshal is not the one that's on the truck that's going out and fighting the fire. He's the administrator that's in charge of that jurisdiction. And now he looks at it and says, well, it's in a required area in a business. It still needs to be inspected by a licensed fire extinguisher company. Our response is, what do you need to be able to circumvent that? And they said, well, okay, you got to revert to whether it's Title 19 here in California or NFPA 10. And NFPA 10 allows for a certified individual who is licensed to be able to maintain their own fire extinguishers. So then we created a certification program that the end user can take, and it speaks all to this new technology and how they can maintain that. And we have had jurisdictions that are accepting that. We're working our way here through California on the potential of an L license, where it's what that's called a limited license, where a business could get that license, and then they can maintain their own Eliminator fire extinguisher.
We had the California, LA school district, that's 114,000 extinguishers. They wanted it, and then the virus hit us.
Yeah.
So what we were going to do is we were going to go from LA school district, we were going to go hit New York school. Then we have the two top school districts in the world.
And there was a lot of interest in the Los Angeles Unified School District. Currently, they've brought the service in-house as it is. They're essentially a service company within the walls of their own organization. And they have, I believe it's 6 individuals that are licensed and trained. So this can kind of streamline their whole business model as it is today.
Sure.
We had their powder checked at the lab, right, when they came back.
Yeah. I think Mike's going to get into that. But what we found when we went to one of the large retailers, and we met with a compliant individual, and they're spending an upwards of $10, $15, $20 million a year maintaining their extinguishers nationwide. So this is a real cost saver for them. When you consider a large box retailer, they really tighten down everything on their suppliers and try and take a lot of cost when there's a lot of money going right out the door when it comes to the maintenance of the extinguishers. And then you add the element on top of that the required maintenance on a traditional stored pressure fire extinguisher is compromising the performance of it, that all that process of 9 years of UL is completely ignored and overlooked. When you bring this new technology in, it is the only product that can keep the integrity of what it was tested at UL for the life of the product. All bets are off on the other extinguishers because you really have to have a perfect environment and equipment and everything. And because of the competition and the competitiveness and the price, it's like a race to the bottom. And what's unfortunate is the public is what's at risk when it comes to the traditional fire extinguisher. And there might be naysayers that say, oh, you can mix the chemical, but it clearly states on the product, you have to keep the OEM, what's on the nameplate. So does NFPA 10. So does our Title 19 here in California. Well, I believe the reason why it hasn't been surfaced is because it'll still operate. You'll still fire it off if you get all the chemical out. But is it ever followed up and tested how much was left in the extinguisher?
Right.
Because our experience when we were at UL, you have to fire everything off to get all of those requirements of all those different fires out. So it's completely irrational to be able to have the fire extinguisher out there in the field and having it compromised with no follow-up, that it needs to maintain that integrity that it was originally earned with that listing. That, if that makes sense. Yeah. So with the new product, it's user-friendly. The end user knows how to maintain it, and it will perform for the life of how it was originally tested and sent out as brand new.
Right.
So you all have been on a journey for 17 years to really fix a systemic issue in the fire extinguisher, fire safety space. And you've persevered through product design, everybody saying you couldn't get it done, giving you 15 minutes, fighting through all the different standards for passing the tests, now getting people to understand the code and how the code applies to that, educating people. What an incredible journey. So we've covered 17 years in a 2-hour period. And the journey continues as you're educating people on the benefits of this and the challenges that are putting people's lives at risk because we're not following the code because of fires, because of service companies, because of people not knowing it. So very exciting. We're all in this together, trying to make this systemic change. We've covered a whole lot of ground. Do you have any final words of wisdom on your journey and kind of what's your picture of the future?
I do. I want to mention also our manufacturer. You know, we left off where we were bouncing around different manufacturers in Asia. We ended up being referred to by one of our business associates to National Presto. And National Presto is out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And there was a relationship there, and we started a conversation with them. And early on, there was some strong interest there, which we couldn't quite understand. And we said, well, would you like to get together? And the CEO, she's the daughter of the individual who started the company, and they flew out, and she brought 6 or 7 of her top executive members with her out here to meet with us. And they spent about 3 days here. And what I did is I presented the product to them and the reason why and the mission for the first morning to noon. And then I just brought business influencers in, you know, maintenance director of the university, our patent attorney, different facility managers, and just let them fire off questions and talk to them about what is their relationship with maintaining their facility and portable fire extinguishers and things like that. And in the course of that meeting, they also, National Presto has been manufacturing over 100 years, and they're in the small appliance, and they're one of the leaders in the small appliance business, and they're diversified. They make ammunition for the United States government since World War II, and they are in the adult incontinent business. And they have this incredible piece of automated manufacturing for the diaper, and it caught on fire. Unbeknownst to us, we didn't know that. And several of the extinguishers did not operate, and it was very costly. So we had their attention before even coming out and meeting with us. And we ended up as a licensing opportunity, and they're our manufacturer, and they've been overwhelmingly supportive. Great, solid engineering team. They had the 90-year relationship with UL to get us over the hump, and we have other sizes and a lot of other products that we're developing them that's forthcoming, and to get somebody that sees the vision and where we want to go is that's very rewarding. And there for them also there's also challenges that they didn't understand or know the industry, because they've only been selling really through to retail. And there's a lot of branches on this, and the fire equipment and fire industry in a whole, it's they're a little slow to change, and it's not them as individuals. It's because of the layers of the code and the regulations. So we don't want to blame it on they are our heroes. They're the ones that protect us, and they're tasked with a very dangerous job every day. And then we come along and say, well, we're just going to have the solution to everything. Forget about what you've been upholding for the last 70 years, and let's just go with this.
Well, that's what they had.
That's a little challenging for them, but we're getting there as a team and working together.
Yeah, the Office of the State Fire Marshal sent 2 new state fire marshals down to see us, and the one was very attentive, and he'd like get into the fog, and he kind of wandered off thinking about this extinguisher. The other one was very talkative, and the one that was quiet, after about 45 minutes. He sat up and he said, "Wow." He said, "Al, wow." And Al says, "What's the deal?" He said, "Do you realize what they're trying to do?" He said, "What?" "They want to change the whole industry." He got it. He said, "Wow."
The
And
light
then
went on.
we just recently had a meeting with Al and the gentleman who's now in charge of fire extinguishers. And during our conversation, Jeff said, "Well, guys, you can't call it new technology. It's not new technology. It's just the old Ansel, and it's cylinder operated." And I said, "Yeah, it's like saying that the the gasoline driven cars are no different than the electric cars because they're both cars and got four wheels." Nah, let me tell you something, friend.
Look under the hood.
This is new technology. There's two things that are innovative. Okay, the innovative part stands at its part, and that is the
Auger.
auger in the center that fluffs the powder, and you can at any time, 20 years from now, whenever, it'll do it. Okay, and the other part is, you don't even think about this, is the taper. Okay, now those two together, you reverse it and turn that auger, that makes it all happen, and that is new technology. And to go further, it's the cylinder itself. It's mold process, which is way out in front of the old, the welding and all that stamped steel and stamped aluminum. This is mold, and so they're all exactly the same. And UL states very clearly that it makes it repeatable, and so it's safer. Okay, so this, and Al said, "Yeah, you're right. It is new technology." So we're still educating them.
Right.
So you asked Mike that the journey is going to continue. There's 8 to 10 million, 12 million extinguishers sold annually, just off of replacement value. We are going after that market in addition to the embedded base. And the embedded base is extinguishers that are currently in service, and that if they want to take a shot and take a look at this, to be able to bring that maintenance in house, and or just streamline it if they want to continue working with their third party service provider that they have. And we've assembled an awesome team, and we're really looking forward to the future. Looks very bright. We're getting a lot of traction, a lot of interest, and to play off of what Hector just said, there's never been a portable fire extinguisher with such a small pressurized cylinder, the CO2 that's like, for paintball guns or the soda stream at your home, that it's pressurized and operated from. Never. So that piece alone is very innovative in their product, and it was part of that R&D and the innovation that came out of the testing at UL and our engineering fantastic group at Presto that we've come out, and we've got a lot more exciting products coming.
And keep this in mind too, and that our extinguisher, it's good for the home as well as the business. It gives the same protection to both.
Sure.
And it's real protection. It's not just a line of regulations.
Right.
And see, if you're a homeowner and you're relying on, and it's always been a disconnect, and we've had a lot of discussions with both UL and the fire marshals. On a commercial setting, you're heavily regulated, and you must maintain that every year. You have to do the tear down every 6 years. You got to do pressure testing on the cylinder. But you can buy the same design at a large box retailer and take it home, and you put it, under the sink in the garage, wherever, and there's no warning and there's nothing to tell you that extinguisher needs to be maintained. And some of them they claim to be good for 10 years. But what happens is when the homeowner goes to use it, a lot of times I'll call Rudy, or the office will call him, go out and do a homeowner, and tell them what you think about going and servicing a homeowner's extinguisher.
I think not again, because it could be a disposable fire extinguisher, and I can't do anything with disposable other than sell them a new one, and they're going to want to go to Home Depot, buy the same extinguisher they already have.
And they'll buy the
for
cheapest one.
discounted price. Yeah.
So when you think about your own public or your own family's safety, and a fire extinguisher at the end of the day is just like a spare tire in your car. You don't care about it, you don't think about it, but in the middle of the day, out in the middle of nowhere, you get a flat tire and you have no cell phone service. That spare tire is the most important thing you can have to get you on the road. And that's the way a fire extinguisher is. The majority of the individuals don't really think about it unless it's their responsibility, but they don't think about it. They don't really care about it. So we wanted to bridge that gap and produce a product that in the event of a fire, the dependability will be there for you. And not only will it be there for you, you have the ability to reload and or know how to maintain it and show your whole staff and or family how to operate it.
So, Mike, how many do you want?
Well, Mike and I, founded Fire Technology Innovations, based on what you have. And obviously it's been an honor to know you guys, to meet you guys over the last couple years. And we're proud to be a part of this. And, we at Fire Technology Innovations have, creating this podcast series to help educate. And, we want to create dialogue and have people engage with us, engage with you, because this is important. People's lives have been lost, property has been lost, and we feel that that's why we're behind this, and we really want to work to get the people involved and educated on what innovation is out there.
Thank you.
And I'd like to salute you all for your perseverance to a mission of saving lives and protecting property, and not just thinking about a product, but a systemic solution and all the different parts necessary to drive behavior change to deliver a different result. Because Einstein said insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. You guys are changing the paradigm throughout the entire fire extinguisher ecosystem to get a better result, a different result that will save lives and protect property. And thank you so much for sharing your great story with John and I today, and then all of our customers and followers. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Appreciate your support.
You've been listening to the Life and Fire Safety Podcast.